It's awesome to have all of you with us today, and I'm always excited when we're going to start a brand new series. We're launching one called I'm In. In this series, like what I want to do is kind of help you understand the heart behind our church, and at the same time talk to you a little bit about one of the core themes of the gospel, and that's this, that everyone is invited to God's family. Now, I don't know about you, but to me, one of the worst feelings is to feel left out, to feel uninvited. You know, when I was a kid, I remember, there was a couple of times that happened to me. I don't know if it ever happened to you, maybe not, but it happened a couple of times to me where, you know, there was a birthday party and a lot of the kids that I knew had been invited and I didn't get invited. And, you know, it might have been that maybe I didn't even know the kid or even like the kid very much, but I just felt really awful that I didn't get invited, right? So it's like the sinking feeling of not being, you know, in that group, of not being invited. It just really didn't feel good. You know, maybe it was something else. Maybe you're on your, you know, Instagram and you see all your friends are at this one place, maybe at a Starbucks hanging out, and somehow you didn't get invited, and that just probably doesn't feel good. Or maybe you're walking into a church for the very first time, and maybe you don't have, you know, the right clothes on, or you don't smell the right way, and, you know, somebody gives you a comment like, hey, we wear our best to church here, you know, we wear our best to God, for God in His church. You know, why are you wearing what you're wearing? You know, make you feel unwelcome and uninvited to the place where you should feel the most welcome. And, you know, I actually had a friend who, you know, many years ago, and she was actually my boss as well, but we became really good friends after a few years of working with her. And she had two amazing kids, and I remember that one day we were talking about church. I had already become a Christian, so I was kind of inviting her to one of our events at church, and I kept wanting to invite her, and finally did. And you know, she would joke around and say, no, you don't want me at your church, the walls are going to fall down, you know, that kind of thing. She used to joke around a lot about that. And then like one day, you know, she kind of got really serious and kind of let me have it. She just kind of let me have it. And she's like, you know what, I've been to a couple of churches a couple of times, and I really feel like they really made me feel like I don't belong there, and I'll never step into a church again. And I thought, wow, what must have happened? Well, you know, my friend, she had a little boy who was autistic, and he was an amazing kid, but he had autism. And so she walked into the church, one of the churches, the first church, and she told me that she walked in and she went into the pews and sat down, you know, with her kids. And you know, when you're new to a church, you don't automatically put him in the classes or whatever. And she was late as well, so she just kind of sat down. The worship was going on, and her son started, you know, kind of pounding on the, you know, on the back of the chairs or whatever. And like somebody came up to her and said, you know, you can't be here, your son's distracting everybody. And you can imagine what happened after that. She left and she never came back. She tried it again a few years later at another church, and pretty much the same thing happened to her again. They asked her to leave because her son was distracting the other people. And so she felt like she was not wanted at church, and she didn't belong there. And it was her son that was, you know, was her kid, right? So she, of course, felt like she didn't belong there. So she did not want to try it. She's like, you know, I'm like, well, the third one's, you know, the charm, right? This day I will joke around with her, try one more time and see what happens. And she's like, no, I will never step into a church again. And I haven't been in contact with her for many years, but as far as I know, she has not been in church. And I'm really saddened by that. And that really marked, I think that one of the moments that kind of marked, like, forever, like my way of looking at church, and I thought that's not where church is supposed to be. I really feel like church should be a place where everybody's welcome. And I think that's one of the things that kind of, when my husband and I were planning this church, I believe that's one of the things, you know, it really came into play when we were talking about what will be important in our church. And one of the things we both agreed on was that everybody should be welcome in church, and our church should be a church where we would welcome everyone. So, you know, it's just, if you've ever felt, you know, ashamed or unworthy of being in a place or uninvited, you know, I want you to hear the greatest truth. One of the greatest truths about the Bible, about the gospel of Jesus, is that Jesus invites the people that other people reject. So Jesus invites the people that others reject. You know, He invites those that the religion despises, that other people overlook, you know, that other people reject. Today I want to dive deep into the story in the Gospel of Luke, and it's in Luke chapter 7. And I want to give you a little bit of context so you kind of have an idea of what's going on there. So it's about 2,000 years ago, and Jesus was walking on the face of the earth, and Jesus claimed to be God in the flesh. Now people didn't know if this was true, should they believe him, or was he just a crazy man saying he was, you know, the Son of God, right? But certainly, though, a lot of people that they thought, well, if he really is, if he really is the Son of God, if he really is God in the flesh, then certainly he would be in favor of the Pharisees, right? He would be for the Pharisees. He would be like on the Pharisees' team or cheering for the Pharisees, because the Pharisees were the most, outwardly, they were just kind of pious. They were always like outwardly religious. They would, always have those long robes, and they would always speak out loud, and they were always, showing off all they knew. They prayed long, eloquent prayers. They had these elaborate tassels, and they had all these cleansing ceremonies. So, they were very impressive spiritually, right? So surely if Jesus were God, he would be in favor of the Pharisees, you would think. Well, one day a Pharisee named Simon invited, he decided to throw a party at his house. And a party during that time, the Pharisee would throw is not the same as a party we would throw nowadays, here today. For example, they wouldn't be roasting hot dogs, or, they wouldn't be listening to the latest Jewish rap songs or anything like that. It was totally different than that. What they would do is they would gather, kind of like the who's who of the Pharisees, and they would go and they would put on display all the knowledge that they had. And they would talk about important, impressive things. So it was kind of like a public discussion, and they would show off all their wealth. And what they would do is they would have a meal. They would plan a meal at a house, and then the house, they would do it in the outer room of the house. And this outer room, it had like a little, it was known as the outer room of the house, and they had like a kind of like a little, surrounded by a porch. So they had the outer room, they would sit there, and they would had a porch around it. And what they would do is they would meet, and they would dine, and they would recline, and they would, talk about important stuff, important things. And they would leave the door open on the porch so that the common people could come in and listen to them. And listen to them talk about all this cultural trends and politics and theology and everything. And why did people come and listen to that, right? You're probably saying, why would they even come and listen to that, right? But you have to understand there was no internet. There was no Wi-Fi, there was no TV, there was no video games, there was no, Fortnite, there was none of that stuff. There was no Netflix even, imagine that. There was no, cell phones, and there was none of that stuff. There was no, you couldn't kind of binge watch NCIS or anything like that. None of that stuff could happen. So, this was kind of like the first century entertainment for them. So what happened was Jesus got invited to the party, and suddenly someone else came that was not invited. And when this person walked into the party, it was the most shocking thing that these Pharisees had ever experienced. And they hated every single moment of it. And Luke tells us in Luke 7:37, he says, a woman in that town who lived a sinful life. Now let me pause for a moment. Let me tell you that's code language for the town prostitute. That's what that means. She was a town prostitute. A woman there in town who had lived a sinful life learned that Jesus was eating at the Pharisee's house. So she came there with an alabaster jar of perfume. So imagine this, the Pharisees, they're sitting in the outer room, they're pressing everybody, with their conversation, and then suddenly this call girl walks into the party. And every Pharisee just goes, oh my gosh, what's going on here? Why is she in here? How dare she come in here? She's not invited, she's unclean. We don't want her here. What is she doing here? We don't hang around those kind of people, right? So she's not worthy, she's not invited. And I just want you to pause for a moment if you can, and just kind of try to get into the mind of this young, hurting woman. And imagine what it would have been for her, to be her, right? To be her. I'm gonna get a little creative here and thinking about her situation, but and I can't prove any of this, of course, but in my heart, and with all my heart, I believe that although she did make some really bad choices, I would bet my life that she never dreamed of growing up to be a prostitute. I can guarantee that there never was a time when she had all her 11-year-old friends over for a slumber party, and they were all talking and, playing truth or dare or whatever they were playing, and then they were all saying, what do you want to do when you grow up? And one of them was like, oh, well, I want to sell Mary Kay, and, oh, well, I want to be, I want to be a Netflix singer, I want to be a YouTube singer, YouTube's Netflix, I want to do, I want to be a teacher, I want to be this, and she's like, oh, well, I want to be a prostitute. I want to have my own pimp. Yeah, for sure I can get my own pimp one day. That's what I want to do when I grow up. That did not happen. I guarantee that did not happen. That didn't happen at all. And I don't know how she ended up to be a prostitute, but I do know that everywhere that this woman went, everywhere she went, every day men used her, abused her. Every woman would glare at her and kind of, scorn her with their eyes. And they would probably, grab their kids when they came near her. And don't go near her. She's one of those girls, she might have felt like a lot of us, feel sometimes. Not good enough, guilty for, where we've been and what we've done, and wondering how we ended up where we are today. I never thought I'd be divorced or bankrupt or maybe not in contact with one of my kids. I never thought I'd be where I am here today. Now, she felt uninvited, so what did she do? This woman walks into the Pharisees' party. She walks in there. She goes straight to Jesus, and she falls to her knees in the posture of worship. Now, she breaks open this jar of alabaster oil perfume, and she pours it on his feet. Why was this significant? Why was this such an important thing that they put in this text? Well, for two reasons. One, because, it was her most valuable possession she had. Perfume was actually really rare at that time, so almost nobody could afford it. Not everybody could afford it. So, the value of it would have been probably like a year's worth of her salary. So this was like her little nest egg, her savings that she had, right? And not only was it valuable financially, but it was a symbol of what she did in her future. Perfume was kind of like her business card. Because not regular women couldn't wear perfume, couldn't afford to wear perfume. When men smelled a woman that was wearing perfume, it was kind of like, she's available, right? So why does she come and she does this? She breaks open that jar and she pours it on his feet. She's kind of like giving up. At the same time, she's kind of like giving up her future. She's giving up what she's been doing. She's giving up the most valuable thing that she has. In verse 38, it says, as she stood behind Jesus at his feet, weeping, she couldn't stop her crying. She began to wet his feet with her tears. Then she wiped them with her hair, and she kissed them and poured perfume on them. So she couldn't stop the emotion. She couldn't stop. She was just crying and crying, right? And then she wipes his feet with her hair. And I'm going to tell you the significance of this as well. Because in the day of Jesus, today, women can wear their hair down like I'm doing now. It might be like appropriate, fun, attractive. My husband thinks it's sexy, right? But, hair down, that's what it is. It's okay to wear your hair down as a woman nowadays. But in the day of Jesus, that would have been considered completely inappropriate. Because a Jewish woman would never, ever unbind her hair in public. So this woman, she's overcome with emotion. She's there at his feet, she's crying, she wets his feet, and then suddenly she's like, oh my gosh, I wet his feet, I don't have a towel. What do? She unbinds her hair and she starts drying them with her own hair. She just can't contain her love, her adoration, her emotion, her worship for God. In verse 39 says, the Pharisees were beside themselves. You can imagine, right, how they were. When the Pharisees who had invited Jesus, that's Simon, when Simon, the Pharisee, saw this, I want you to watch what happens here. He says to himself, and he didn't say it out loud, he said it to himself. He said to himself, if Jesus were a prophet, he would know who's touching him and what kind of woman she is, that she's a sinner. So in other words, Simon thinks that the fact that Jesus is letting this woman touch him or go near him means that he's not a prophet. Because if he was really the Son of God, he would know that she was a sinner. And then check out what Jesus does. He responds to him. He says, turns toward the woman, and then he says to Simon, do you see this woman, Simon? I came into your house, and you didn't even give me any water for my feet, but she wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. Simon, you didn't even give me a kiss when I came in. You didn't even give me a kiss when I came in. But this woman, she hasn't stopped kissing me since she came in. She's been kissing my feet. Simon, you didn't put oil on my head, but she poured perfume on my feet. Therefore, Simon, I tell you, yes, she's a sinner, but her many sins have been forgiven, as her great love has shown. But whoever has been forgiven little, loves little. Then Jesus looks at this hurting woman and says, your sins are forgiven. You are whole, you are new, you are white as snow, Jesus tells her. And here's a question I'd like to answer this morning is, why did this woman risk so much at the feet of Jesus to be there? Why? Why would she do this? Because it was a risk for her to come into that house. You know, she had to come into that porch with all those common people were at. People who saw her, I'm sure they would be whispering, psst, psst, there she is, it's her. She's one of those call girls. Ooh, watch out, don't let her touch you, she's a sinner. She's unpure, she's unclean, right? Why would she have gone into that house of the Pharisees? They wouldn't even walk at the same side of the street as she was. They wouldn't go near her. But she ignored every other person in the room and she went straight to Jesus. Now the text doesn't tell us, but I really, really believe that she must have somehow, somewhere experienced his divine nature, his grace, heard him teaching, heard him preaching somewhere. And here's what I think might have happened. Now, Jesus was in her town, and she must have heard him preaching. And my guess probably was that same day because she came in with some urgency to go right to his feet. So Luke doesn't tell us exactly, but earlier in that very same chapter, Luke does tell us that the disciples of John the Baptist came to question Jesus, and Jesus was speaking. And Matthew's gospel also tells us the same story, the same parallel version of the very same story. It talks about the day when John the Baptist's disciples came to Jesus. They were questioning him, and that very day, which would have been the same day that this woman crashed that party, she heard, she probably heard the same message there. And what do you think his message was? I'm going to summarize the message and then I'll show you where it is. The summary of the message that Jesus gave that day, that perhaps this woman heard, at the back of the crowd, probably too ashamed to get up close. The summary of the message that Jesus gave that day was this: you are invited to God's family. You are invited, you are welcome, you can come just as you are. The message this woman would have heard as she was there in that crowd that day, when she crashed the party in Simon's house, is come to me, you're invited. Who's invited? Who's welcome? Jesus said, come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Can you feel his love? Can you feel his love? Come to me, those who are wrecked and overcome with guilt. Come to me, those who are burdened by shame. Come to me if you're tired of trying and trying and you never feel like you get anywhere. Come to me, those who have been rejected again and again, over and over again. Come to me, those who have been turned away, Jesus says. He says, come to me when you feel like you've got nothing left. Come to me when you've lost all hope, Jesus says. He says, come to me when everything you feel, it feels desperate and you feel like you just can't go on one more day. Jesus says, come to me when you're weary, when you're overwhelmed, and I will give you heavenly rest. Jesus said, take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. Jesus says, you're still invited. You're welcome in God's family. My Father sent me to tell you that he loves you. You're invited. I want you to notice a few things about this story. It's something that's just so important, and I really want to make sure that everybody gets this. I want you to notice that pointing out that woman's sins didn't lead her out of her lifestyle of sin. You see that? Judging her lifestyle didn't change her lifestyle. Shaming her for what she did didn't set her free from her painful past. What was it that changed her? An invitation to know the Son of God, to experience his grace, his goodness, his love, and his freedom. Because you have to understand that Jesus didn't come for the healthy. He came for the sick. And Jesus says, you're invited. Come as you are. Come now and know my grace. It doesn't matter who you are. Listen, if you feel unwanted, maybe you feel like you failed, you doubted God, you feel like nobody cares about you. Heck, the dog doesn't even like you. It doesn't matter. God says, come to me. Come to me because you're still invited. Even if you've let God down, you tried and failed and tried and failed, God said, you're still invited. Come to me if you feel unworthy. Come to me with your doubts, he says, with your addictions, with all your hang-ups, with all your baggage, with all your past. Come to me with those things other people don't like and judge. Just come to me. He says, come to me and I will give you rest. Come to me. You know, we're all equal at the foot of the cross. All of us are. Some of us may think we have more baggage than others, but it doesn't matter because we're all equal at the foot of the cross. You know, there's always room in God's house. There's always room in God's family. You know what? When you come to Jesus, don't come alone. Don't come alone. Bring somebody with you. Invite others to know his grace. You know, his goodness and experience what heaven feels like. Come to Jesus, but invite others to know him as you do. Jesus told another story in Luke 14. Talked about a guy throwing a big wedding banquet, a reception, a big party, you know. And he told this guy, you know, he invited a bunch of people to come to the party, but everybody had excuses to not come to the party. You know, oh, we just got married, or we just bought a house, we just can't come, I'm plowing my field, you know, and today we'll probably say, oh, I'm just so busy, or I'm just too tired, you know, I just can't, I'm not interested. And you know what Jesus said? He said that if they're not interested, you go out and you compel them. You compel them to come. Compel them to come. You show them, you describe the party, you describe my love, you help them to see my kingdom, my family, that my family offers. And then he said, compel the blind, compel the lame, and the crippled to come. If all those other people that people expect to be at my party don't want to come, then you go out and you invite the blind, the lame, and the crippled. Why does this matter? Because the day when Jesus lived, if you were blind or lame or crippled, everybody assumed that you did something really bad. That's why you were like that. You were like that because you did something really bad. He wants us to compel those that everybody else despises, overlooks, or rejects. You compel them, he says, to come into my kingdom. There's still room. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter how unworthy you feel. You're invited to the family of God. Would you pray with me? Oh, Father God, we just thank you so much, Lord. I thank you, Lord, that you are always inviting us to come to you. The way we are, it doesn't matter how we come to you. You just want us to come. And God, I pray today that you would inspire